Hello and welcome to this mental wellbeing lesson. My name is Charlie Day and I work for the Christian organisation NISCU. Today we are not going to be talking about faith, but we're going to be talking about the importance of mental wellbeing. Recently, I interviewed record-breaking runner Paul Tierney about exercise, his record attempt, and the challenging topic of mental health. This interview deals with very challenging and difficult topics which are important to talk about. If this video affects you or someone that you care about, please get in touch with the member of staff that has sent you this video. If you are in immediate danger, then please call the emergency services. The aim of this video is to share about the importance of talking about mental health, and both Paul and I hope that as a result of this video, young people can understand that it is okay to ask for help and also the importance of looking out for our friends. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Paul Tierney about his record-breaking run over the 214 Wainwright Fells.
He looked at me and he said, "I don't know how I'm going to get through the next 2 days."
It's not fun anymore.
So we're here today with runner Paul Tierney. So hello Paul, how are you doing?
All right, Charlie.
So just tell us a bit about who you are and where you're from.
My name is Paul Tierney. I've lived over here in the Lakes for 7 years now. I moved over just because I like fell running. I do a lot of fell running and it's important to do what makes you happy and try different things. I was able to get a career break from work, so it wasn't like it was massively risky. You know, it was something I could try, and if it didn't work out, I could just go back to my job.
You were a policeman and you moved over here essentially to run, but have you always been a runner?
No, from the time I was, 6 or 7 up until my early 20s, would have played team sports. So football, and then the Irish version of football, so Gaelic football, hurling. They were probably my main sports, hurling in particular. So if for anyone who doesn't know or hasn't heard of it, I suppose it's like a cross between hockey and lacrosse maybe. Basically you have a stick and you hit a ball that's about the same size as a hockey ball, but it happens in the air as well, so you can catch the ball in the air. That was my passion from the time I was maybe 12 till, like I say, my early to mid 20s. And I went to Australia. At the time, triathlon was kind of really getting more popular, and I tried a little bit of that while I was over in Australia and absolutely loved it. That sort of got me into endurance sport, and then because I realized it was a bit of a faff doing triathlon, so a friend of mine just suggested one day that we go for a run in a local kind of woodland not too far from where I lived. I just loved it immediately, and it just took off from there. I just absolutely loved it.
In lockdown, pretty much the only thing that we can do is to go outside once a day. How important is that to you?
Well, yeah, if I didn't have that, then lockdown would be a whole lot harder to deal with. So it's incredibly important. I mean, and that's evidenced by seeing how many people maybe don't normally go out for a run are now doing that, or whether it's just for a walk or cycling or but just getting out. You really notice there's people who wouldn't ordinarily do that, and this has kind of opened their eyes to the benefits of it. Funnily enough, I was in the pet shop here locally the other day buying some stuff for the dogs, and I was talking to the guy behind the counter. He's lived all his life, but just realized, geez, I might just try a bit of walking, and he's like a different person. It's like meeting a completely different person now, having been fell walking for the last 6 months. He's just changed completely. His whole mood, his persona. He's lost weight, which is obviously a nice side effect, I guess, for him. But he's just happy. You can just tell, and he's really psyched about getting up the fells, and so that's what it can do for some people. He's a great example of why it's important, and so maybe that's one of the positives of this lockdown. It's probably shown some people anyway that that's a great thing to have in your life. When things get difficult for whatever reason, it can be really, really useful to deal with things going on in your head.
Obviously, we live in this amazing place in Cumbria. So what would you say to young people about using this opportunity to exercise?
Yeah, I didn't have an appreciation for the outdoors like I might have now. So so I do understand if people aren't attracted to running up a hill or walking up a hill, even if they do live around here. But it's probably not about necessarily thinking of it that way. It's finding something that you're passionate about, whether it's football, I don't know, hockey, rugby, or painting or reading or whatever, I think at that age, it's important to have something that you are passionate about and to put some time into it and to maybe think of it as maybe not quite as important, but certainly massively important alongside, the academic side of things, because it can be a coping mechanism, like I say, when things aren't going so well for you. I think exercise itself has that extra element of increasing endorphins and burning off a little bit of excess energy, allowing you to maybe process some things you've been thinking about in your head a bit easier. Like, how many people can relate to going out and doing some exercise or going for a walk and actually figuring out problems that they couldn't figure out while they were sat doing their homework or at a desk doing some work. So it can be that little bit of a break to allow your mind to just work through some things. I would say it's really, really important to just make a little bit of time in your day for that. It doesn't have to be running or massively vigorous exercise. It could be just literally a walk. So if you're stuck behind a desk having to study or do homework or schoolwork, that work will be done probably to a higher standard if you get a few of those breaks to go out and just move about and do a little bit of physical activity.
You're not just a runner, Paul. You are a record-breaking runner for summiting all of the Wainwright fells. That's 214 fells in Cumbria. And what on earth made you think that was a good thing to do?
Well, I never said it was a good thing to do. I just I've always had things I wanted to do in whatever sport it was, and I guess from being involved in fell running over here and from being attracted to longer distance stuff, it was a kind of an obvious one to try, I suppose, because Steve Birkinshaw had done it back in 2014, and I would have looked up to, or still look up to, Steve Birkinshaw, and when he did that back in 2014, I just remember thinking it was so far beyond what I would be able to do. At the time, looking at him doing that and looking at him suffer and really struggle afterwards as well, it wasn't really something that I suppose appealed that much, but I could appreciate what he had to go through to achieve it and the planning that went into it. And from going and doing other long races, I kind of realized that although it might be still well beyond me, I was a little bit closer to feeling like I could try something like that. So that was sort of bridging the gap between a 7-day endeavor like what Steve had done and the 24-hour thing the races I had done previously. So that just gave me a little bit of confidence to maybe consider trying it. Yeah, I'm just motivated by trying things that I don't necessarily think I'll be able to do, but that aren't completely beyond me. You know what I mean? You have to base it on reality as well. And I knew that as runners, myself and Steve were maybe evenly-ish paced. If we were to race against each other, it wouldn't be too far apart. So I thought that I might have some outside chance.
So you're about to set off on something that's over 300 miles long, and you're going to be climbing Everest over like 4 times. What was going through your mind as you set off on that day?
It shouldn't have been like this, but I was particularly worried as I was setting off, because I'd come down with these hay fever-like symptoms, and I was like lacking energy as well, and just not sleeping very well. And the night before I started, I went to bed kind of feeling a little bit overwhelmed and just did not sleep almost at all. I think I got maybe an hour's sleep. I just lay there most of the night worrying about this thing that was going to take me a week to do, and I was going into it in a sleep-deprived state. So luckily, once I got up, had some breakfast, drove to Keswick, met a few of the people that were there. I do remember being really worried on the morning, and as soon as we got going, that sort of just slipped into the background, and it was all right.
Once you'd set off, you've gone up your first fell. What was it like kind of from then on?
I just remember like Steve was with me on the first leg, and Jacob Tonkin and James Gibson as well for the first leg over Latrig and the fells between Thurlemere and Borrowdale. So a bit boggy and kind of slowish going, but felt good because it was early in the attempt. And I remember getting to Borrowdale after about 5.5 hours and just thinking to myself, there's 6 days to go, but I am a little bit tired, and this is going to be pretty interesting.
As you've said, it's such a long period of time to be out. Were there moments that made you think, I just want to stop? And if so, how did you get through those?
When you're doing something like that, or any type of endurance challenge or sport, that you'll have moments where there's a little bit of doubt or a kind of an inkling in your brain that says, why don't you just take the easy option and stop? What I've learned from doing stuff like this is that you have to prepare for that moment when that happens, or moments. If you don't rehearse that in your brain and kind of think about how you're going to deal with that, then when it happens, you're not prepared, and it's much easier then to just throw in the towel. So I had done a lot of thinking about what was going to happen during the course of the week and how bad I was going to feel. I wasn't focusing on how good I was going to feel at any point. I was trying to make it as horrible an experience in my mind as I could, because that allowed me then to think about, okay, well, if it's going to be horrible, how are you going to deal with that? Like, what are you going to do to mitigate against that? Or what are you going to do when that happens? What's your plan? And so I had rehearsed what I was, the way I was going to think, the way I was going to frame things in my mind, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of framing things in your head in a certain way. And actually, if you can control those thoughts and turn them into a positive, then it's an incredibly useful thing to be able to do. You're feeling absolutely knackered and your legs are sore, and that's all you're thinking about. Well, that it's very easy then to just let that spiral and get out of control and just jack it in. Whereas if you think, right, my legs are really, really sore, I'm really, really tired. Okay, well, what can I do to help with this situation, or how can I frame this in a way that doesn't seem so bad? And you put a positive spin on it, and suddenly your perception of effort changes. It doesn't feel as difficult to keep moving. You always have to be realistic as well, that you're going to feel like that. You have to almost accept that that's how you're going to feel, so that when it happens, it's not a surprise to you.
You talked about your goals earlier, but did they ever change throughout the course of the challenge?
Not really. Like I wanted to try and go a little bit quicker than Steve's time, and that was if everything goes right, that's the goal. But I was also, like I say, in the back of my mind, willing to. I had told myself that if that slips away or it looks like that's not going to happen, then I still want to get rounded and set a time and get something out of the whole thing. Things stayed just about on track, but like I had to be willing to change them. If you go in with just one outcome and everything's riding on this one goal that you have, and it slips away from you for whatever reason, it could be totally out of your control, then it's much, much more difficult to continue on and get something out of the process. So you need to have alternative backup goals, if you like. And you need to be able to recognize when to kind of put them into action.
Do you have any particular highlights or funny stories of things that happened during the challenge?
Poor Steve, actually, we were crossing a river at 2 a.m. or whatever it was near Mosedale. So this is 5 days in, and Steve had come back out to help again. It was a lovely evening, really calm. It had been a nice, beautiful day that day, and so it was nice and dry. We were, almost finished the leg. We were literally crossing this river, and we were at the little car park at the end of Mosedale. And as we were crossing, Steve his footing slipped and he just went down head first down into the river. So got absolutely drenched. So he had gone through the last 4 hours staying nice and dry, and it was a little bit amusing at the time as well for some of us. I didn't actually notice it at the time. It was only afterwards.
Making this a bit more serious, during the challenge, you were raising money for Mind, which is a mental health charity. Can you just tell us a bit about why that was important for you to do?
Yeah, so because this is, a sport that I do, and I don't think of it as an opportunity to raise money, then I hadn't really done that before. But because this was, it was the longest thing I'd ever done, and seemed like people would be interested in it, and therefore there was an opportunity to maybe raise money for a good cause. And initially, my plan was kind of maybe I love dogs. I have 2 dogs of my own, and I was going to do something for a local dogs trust or something like that. And unfortunately, in April so it was 2019, I did this, in April of that year, a good friend of mine passed away. And so it was the obvious thing to do was to pick Mind as a charity to support. And, they do really good work. I'd spoken to Jo, his partner, about it, and she was keen for me to do it for Mind. And because it was Chris, and because so many people were affected by what happened to him, then it was just an obvious thing to do.
So there's a documentary film about Paul's run, and in your film you mentioned Chris's struggles with mental health, and you mentioned that actually as a friend he would come to you and he would share his struggles. So as a friend, how was that for you when Chris came to you and said, look, I've got a problem?
Yeah, funnily enough, that's sort of not quite how it happened, and this, I suppose, is an important part of the whole thing. Chris suffered, but he suffered most of the time in silence. He didn't tell anyone, and at times that manifested itself as it would look like he was just in a bad mood and he was taking it out on the people around him. That's how it manifested itself. That's how it came across to some of us. I lived with Chris for the first year I moved here. I obviously saw Chris when things were good and he was in good form, and then when things weren't so good. And I didn't really understand at the time, because he didn't talk about it. I didn't really understand why he was in bad form. Maybe at times there was no rhyme or reason to it from my perspective. Sometimes, it was difficult to work with him, but that wasn't because he wanted to be like that. It was because he felt he couldn't talk to anyone about it, or he didn't want to burden people with it. And this is how it manifested, this is how it came out. Like, Chris had a couple of bad months before he passed away, and there was a period of time there for a month or so where we were all really, really worried about him, and it meant that we had to kind of keep a pretty close eye on him. And I slept on his couch for about a week during that time that he sort of opened up a little bit and just spoke about what was going on in his head, and it opened up my eyes a bit more to what he was going through. And I could totally understand then why sometimes it came across that he was like annoyed with his co-workers or whoever, and I'm no expert on mental health, and I was just trying to sit there and listen if he wanted to speak and not really pressure him into speaking. But he was trying to work things out in his head, and it helped, I guess, to speak to someone at that point. And I don't think I was able to offer much useful advice maybe, but actually sometimes it's just someone there to listen, and whoever it is get things off their chest. It can lighten their load a little bit. It's a difficult one. You just have to be there and open your ears and let the person get things off their chest if they feel ready for it, and that's probably the best people can do, really.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because mental health issues are often unseen, as you've said. How important would you say that it is to have close friends to talk to?
I do think that even just talking about a problem, whether it's gotten that bad in your head that you're in this kind of a dark place or not, just having someone that you can share the problem with. Like, it's an age-old thing, isn't it? A problem shared is a problem halved, or whatever. The person might do nothing to help you, but you being able to get this off your chest, and you feel a bit lighter for having done it. You know then that it's almost like this thing you were afraid to speak about. It's out now, and a little bit of the pressure is relieved. And I think if you don't do that, then you can really make things seem a lot worse in your head than they truly are. Sometimes it takes a set of eyes, a kind of an impartial person, or someone who can look at it through a different lens. They can. It's much easier for them to spot how easy it might be to solve this problem that you have. But when you're stuck in that with your own thoughts, and you don't have anyone to share them with, or you're afraid to share them with someone, then the problem can just get much, much bigger in your head. It can be blown out of all proportion. And it takes someone just saying, well, actually, have you thought about it like this? That might be all it takes, And if you don't ever take the opportunity to share the problem, it could be with anyone. It doesn't have to be a close friend. It could be someone who's not that close to you. You might find it easier to share it with someone like that. And it just might be that little bit of breathing space you need to reframe the whole thing and make it easier to deal with. So it's really important to just tell someone.
Sadly, you've lost a great friend, and thank you very much for talking about that and just sharing about the importance of just talking, because I think you're exactly right that actually sometimes we just need to share what's going on and to have someone to listen. So thank you for sharing that. How do you think exercise helps with mental health?
It's like talking to someone about a problem you have. Sometimes it can just allow you to reframe the whole thing in your head as maybe not being as big a deal as you first thought it was. There's an answer to almost everything. I would say there's a way around problems, but you just have to be willing to look for a solution, and as long as you know that there is one, accept that there is always a way around things and an answer to things, then at least you're one step along the way of sorting it out. And I just think exercise gives you that bit of breathing space and a different perspective on issues that are maybe building inside. They can look very different after going out, and whether it's playing football or some other sport, it gives you a bit of breathing space, I think.
Going back to your record, you were out there for days and days and days, but when did the moment come for you that you thought, actually, yes, I've really got a shot at breaking this record? And what did that feel like?
Right up until the last day, I probably wasn't keen on taking it for granted and assuming that I was going to do it. But I suppose I was on track from about the third or fourth day. I was a little bit ahead maybe of the record. And so if I kept moving and didn't get injured, then there was a chance. But I didn't really think about it happening and assume that it was going to happen right up until the last day, because I had a really bad knee for the last 3 days, I suppose, and it got to a point where it was, difficult just hobbling downhill. I was trying all sorts of stuff, going backwards, sliding a bit on my backside. It just became really, really difficult to actually move effectively on the knee. So that was sort of always in the back of my mind that, well, my knee might just lock up and I'll literally have to be carried off the side of the feld. So I tried not to focus on it at all until the last day and the last few hills. And then I suppose I knew that even if I crawled, I'd just about get there on time. So I suppose it was a feeling of relief that I put all these people out by getting them to help me and help me organize things, and then actually be out on the fell at all hours of the day. And the overwhelming feeling was relief that things had come together in the way we had hoped they would, and relief that I knew I wasn't going to have to get up and run again the next day.
Yeah, so you've just mentioned there that obviously you had loads of your friends kind of just out there supporting you. How important was it having those friends there just cheering you on and spurring you on?
It made it much easier to keep going, knowing that, like I say, they had come out and given their own time, and having your friends around you, sort of was a bit reassuring as well at times when you were really, really struggling. You knew you had people who would look out for you and wouldn't see anything bad happen to you, and so there's that kind of reassurance there as well. 4 or 5 days into something like that, and your body is in a mess, and so again, having friends there just allows you to settle down a little bit and yeah, a bit of reassurance.
So tell us just a tiny bit about that last fell, so coming onto the top of Cap Bells and then coming in at the finish. What was that like for you?
The climb up onto Cap Bells, it was really weird because obviously at this stage I was totally and utterly wrecked, and I just remember feeling like I could jog up Cap Bells at the end, which I hadn't been jogging up any of the hills. Obviously, there's so many of them, you just power hike up, and the last little bump to the top of Cap Bells, I just remember thinking I was able to jog and I didn't feel out of breath. It was weird. I suppose my mind had just decided, that, like, we were almost there. It was the last climb of the day. It was pretty much all downhill or flat from there. And it just, it felt effortless for that small period of time. And then I got to the top and I was like, oh, there's still a couple of miles to the finish. And it was difficult again after that. But I thought, like, getting to the last hill, I might stop and have a bit of a celebration. But in the end, we just got to the top of it, and I was like, right, I just want to go get to Keswick and finish. And we just all carried on over the top. And then the finish was brilliant. There was a lot of people there, and got to the steps. And my parents had come over. They were there then at the finish, and loads of my friends were there, and it worked out well. And Joe was there at the finish as well, so it was a bit emotional. One of the lads had brought out Chris's Ambleside AC vest and had given me that to wear to the finish, and it was a nice way for it to come to a close. So.
Do you have a particular favourite Wainwright? I
probably don't. Like, there's too many of them anyway. I'm not a very decisive person, so you put 214 choices in front of me and it gets really difficult. But I like my local hills. Like, I live in Windermere, so I think the closest Wainwright to me is probably Sourhouse, and it's not the most epic looking hill. It's a bit of a mound, there's not a whole pile there, but there's a lovely view from there, and just the fact that it's low. I like being up there, and it's quieter than certain parts of the lakes. So that whole Kentmere Horseshoe is really, really nice.
So we've talked a bit about goals and them being important for you as an endurance athlete, but what can you take from setting goals as an endurance athlete into your day-to-day life?
Having a goal allows you to focus a little bit more clearly, and there's a roadmap to an outcome that you're looking to get to. And without them, you're sort of you don't really know where you're going. You haven't defined where you're going, So I think they work the exact same in sport and in life in general. The one thing I would say is it's much easier to stick to a goal that inspires you and gets you excited about. So sometimes it's easy not to set those goals in life or work or school, because they maybe aren't as inspiring as doing the sport you love or whatever. So while you should apply the same principles, I get how it's much harder to stick to something that maybe seems a bit more mundane or not as fun. But actually instead of thinking about it as a goal needs to be this massive achievement or thing that inspires you a lot, it's important to remember that, like, small little goals and little changes in the way you do things can result in this massive end goal. So just going to bed at 10 p.m. each night allows you to potentially get 8 hours sleep, which then sets you up to be ready to go training or to do study or schoolwork. Like, we know how important sleep is. Without proper sleep, everything just goes down the pan. It affects absolutely every aspect of your life. So that might seem like a really boring, mundane thing to say, but it just has such an overarching effect on everything else that actually it's a really worthwhile goal to have. And I think it's important to remember people don't get to achieve whatever big, massive goal it is without taking care of the little things along the way. It's the little things that in the end get you there. And
well, thank you for that, Paul. And one last question. If you could go back to school and tell yourself one thing, what would it be and why?
When I was in secondary school, and so for the first 3 years, I went to a local school, and I think I did all right. I had really good teachers. It was a good school. I put in a bit of work and also had fun and did sport and kind of enjoyed myself. But I always wanted to go to this other school that was across the other side of the city to play hurling. So this was a school that was renowned for its hurling teams, and I put sport first, and I decided, no, I want to go to this other school. And once I got to the other school, because I was on this team, and it almost gave you a free pass in school. So it's not that they didn't care that you weren't doing your schoolwork, it's just that it almost made it easy for me to kind of put schoolwork on the back foot and concentrate more on hurling. And I'm happy where I have ended up, but I'd have liked to have kept the academic side of things going a bit more and put a bit more emphasis on it, and I know now that you only get back what you put in, and I didn't put in enough, didn't get the results I wanted, and ultimately didn't have the same options open to me when I was going to uni. Then it's nice to be able to give yourself those options and just think a bit more long term. Don't think about the next game you've got in a week's time. You've got to think about 5 or 6 years or 10 years down the line. The better you do at the academic side of things, the more options you have to explore with uni or outside of uni, doing going a different path. Yeah, just give yourself every opportunity.
I think that's a really, really helpful piece of advice. Paul, a massive thank you for joining us today and giving your time and talking about such a sensitive topic. And yeah, we wish you all the best.
No problem. It's great to talk to you, Charlie.
I do hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Paul, and a huge thanks to him for sharing about such a personal topic. If you have been affected by anything that has been brought up in this video, please do get in touch with the member of staff that has sent you this video, or if you or someone else is in immediate danger, please call the emergency services. Thank you.